So be prepared to be annoyed and then hopefully fired up. Remember that election for the Supreme Court in Wisconsin last April? The one that Janet Protasiewicz won by 11 points that changed the makeup of that court? A court that had been 4-3 for the far right for years? A court that had allowed the most gerrymandered maps in the country so that 6 of the state's 8 congressional districts went to Republicans despite the state itself being evenly split, if not Democratic leaning? The court that allowed almost every and all form of voter suppression so Republicans ended up with 65% of the state house despite only having 50% of the vote? The court that was ready to uphold the reinstated abortion law from 1849. The one that made abortion all but illegal and forced medical students to leave the state in order to complete their OBGYN training. Do you remember that election? It was a big deal because the people who believed in democracy and fairness worked their hearts out to get people out to the polls, and the extremists lost. Over 1 million people voted for the justice who believed in fair districts and the rule of law and reproductive freedom. And that really should be the end of the story, because the people came out and made their voices heard. But if we've learned anything over the past 6 years, it's that the Republicans no longer care what the people think. It's why the state was gerrymandered in the first place. If you can't beat your opponent, then you rig the game to make sure they can't win. And if they do win, then, like Donald Trump or Carrie Lake, you claim they didn't. But what if they win by so many votes that you can't get people to buy that the election was rigged? Well, the new plan is to have the winner removed. So if you're unable to beat or cheat, you impeach. The Wisconsin Republicans are doing what our House Republicans are doing right now, trying to get rid of a popular chosen representative that they don't like. So before Justice Protasiewicz even has the opportunity to even hear a case, the Wisconsin Republicans are threatening to impeach, convict, and remove her from the bench. For what? Doesn't matter, because it's nothing more than an obscene and unconstitutional power grab from a party that doesn't know how to lose and can't win. Instead of accepting the will of the voter, which as voters we should all want, Republicans have filed 2 bogus lawsuits to stop the justice from ruling on cases that they don't want her to rule on, particularly their blatant gerrymander of the state that gave them the power in the first place. In fact, they wouldn't have the votes to impeach her if the previous Supreme Court hadn't rigged the maps to give them the votes. And now they're saying, we're going to use our unfair power advantage to make sure you can't rule on our unfair power advantage. They're basically saying you can stay provided you recuse yourself from any cases we don't want you ruling on, but she's not going to do that because that's insane and basically makes the Supreme Court just an arm of the state legislature and not its own independent body. So they're going to use their majority to impeach and remove her instead. But isn't that illegal? Well, kinda, but not really, because no one's ever done it before. When the voters elect someone, we assume politicians can't just come in and overturn that election to stay in power. That feels like a pretty basic American value. And yet, here we are, witnessing yet another fundamental attack on our system of government by the Republican Party. Our country, state and federal, has been set up to have 3 co-equal branches, not a dictatorship of any one. This potential action threatens not only the voters of Wisconsin, who Republican representatives want to disenfranchise, but our entire democracy. Because if a Republican legislature is simply allowed to overturn the will of the voter, especially for a Supreme Court justice that's one of the only people that can hold them accountable, then how are we not setting ourselves up for all future court rulings to just be at the whim of whatever party has the legislative majority? I should also remind you that back in 2020, Wisconsin came the closest of any state to overturning the presidential election. A single vote on their court was the difference between the Republicans keeping or overturning President Biden's victory. So we can't be playing games with this seat. It shouldn't matter if you're a liberal or a conservative, if you lean left or right, or if you agree with the policy positions of the Wisconsin Republicans. The question is, do you think your vote should count? Because if election results can simply be overturned, if the people in power don't like the results, then we no longer have elections. And that serves no one but the most corrupt people in power. And if you're thinking, well, if the justice is removed, then can't we just have another election to fill her seat? Yeah, we can, but what would be the point? Aside from just continually wasting taxpayer money, we already know that if a liberal wins, the Republican legislature is just going to turn around and impeach them. Until what? Until they finally get a justice that they want? That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. So what do we do to offset this desperate, unprecedented attempt to erase the vote of 1 million people and lock in gerrymandered maps and a near total abortion ban, and to further the plot to overturn the 2024 presidential election? Well, we get involved. The Democratic Party of Wisconsin has responded to this sham impeachment by launching a campaign called Defend Justice, ensuring that Wisconsin state legislators publicly commit to voting against this undemocratic move and to let the Wisconsin public know exactly what the GOP is trying to do to them. Defend Justice isn't about winning an election. It's about ensuring the survival of our very democracy. All Democratic legislators have already come out in force against this potential impeachment. What we need now are Republican legislators who will choose the will of the people over the will of their party. Legislators who have the courage to vote for what is right and not just what's best for them. I know Wisconsin must have Republican representatives who aren't ready to just give up on democracy. There are a fair amount of state senators whose own constituents voted in majority for Justice Protasewicz. Are they really willing to tell those people that their vote doesn't count? I'm looking at state senators like Robert Cowles, Rob Hutton, Rachel Cabral Guevara, Devin LeMathieu, or Eric Wimberger. You guys know this is wrong. For goodness sake, stand up and have the courage to shut this undemocratic endeavor down. Americans need to come together on this. We need to say we've had enough of these games. The future of our democracy is bigger than our party preference. And a threat to any votes is a threat to all votes. So go to defendjustice.com and find out what you can do to help. Make it clear to the Wisconsin Republicans that you find their unconstitutional and anti-democratic threat to impeach Justice Protasewicz unacceptable, and that following through with it will be a political disaster for them and the country. I think we can all agree we've had enough political disasters to last a lifetime. It's time we said enough is enough. Defend Wisconsin. Defend our votes. Defendjustice.com.